Golden State Media Concepts bring you Book Review Podcast, a haven for bookworms of all ages and the widest genres, from mystery to memoirs, romance to comedy, fantasy to sci-fi. If you love to read, this is a podcast for you. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Hope you had a wonderful weekend and that your week has started off well. Happy Tuesday, I guess I shall say. Hope it's going well, and I hope you've been reading. I, of course, have been reading and interviewing authors. Today I am speaking with author Hale Rambo about her debut novel, Tools of a Thief. In the interview, you'll hear me call her Rambo. That was what she asked me to call her. She said that was fine, or D would be fine either way, whichever one rolled off the tongue. So I did not just randomly start calling an author by her last name. I did clarify how she wanted to be referred to in the interview, because I have spoken with many authors, and often they have different not opinions, but different requests for how they would prefer to be referred to. So there you go. At any rate, it is a high fantasy novel. It is, as I said, Rambo's first novel, her debut novel. Let me give you the description from the back of the book. How do you stop being a thief? Zizi assumed quitting her job, stealing from her boss, and flitting magically across the continent was one way to give it a go. Getting in and out of sticky situations is her specialty. A little spell work here, a little deception there, and she's home free. But even a quick-fingered, fast-talking, charming gnome can find danger, even if she does have the skills to keep herself from getting killed. Pressed into a mission she can't say no to, Zizi feels desperate, out of place, and as lonely as before. But when she meets a charming book hoarder with bold curiosity, Zizi can't help but want to bring her along on this one last job. She'll just hide her past, her present, and the complicated info about herself. What could go wrong? Either she finishes the job and protects those she loves, or it all falls apart. Is this journey the final key to unlock a new path, or just another sticky situation she has to run from? She'll use every tool she's got to get what she wants. And again, that is the description of Tools of a Thief by Hale Rambo. It is, as I said, the first in a series. That series is a series of decisions on Kairos. And as I said, it is high fantasy. One thing that I really liked about this book were the people. I say at one point that this is one book that I would love to see in movie form, if they could get it right, of course, just to see the technicolor aspects of how Rambo describes the characters in this book, because it's high fantasy. So of course there are humans, there's gnomes, there's all different races or species, or however you want to describe them, of people in the book, but they're also all different colors: red, blue, green, gray, just this whole variety of different colors. And they're described not just as blue, but as like sapphire blue or scarlet, and their skin color, their hair color, it's all this just vibrant. I guess some of it's gray, some of it's stone colored or beige, so it's not all vibrant, but just the variety, I think, is fascinating, and I envision it in my head, and I would love to see something like that in a movie form, if this were ever to be made into a movie. So that is one thing that I really did appreciate about the book, and of course we're going to talk more about the plot and the characters and all of those good things. So why don't we go ahead and turn to that interview, and Rambo can tell you more about the process of writing Tools of a Thief. Hi, Rambo. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks, Sarah, for having me.
I'm happy to have you, and I'm excited to talk about your book, Tools of a Thief. Before we get to the book, though, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about yourself, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. So, hello, I'm Hale Rambo, and I'm a bit of a nerd, which means that I basically live in perpetual fandom. I've always been into fantasy and speculative fiction that trends towards comedy. I've written a host of short stories, the adventure modules, and Tools of the Thief is my first novel. My first published novel. Anyways. So yeah, that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
I love that you started with that you're a little bit of a nerd, because I was looking at some of your social media and your web pages last night, and I was actually going to comment that you are, and I mean this as a total compliment, you are a delightful nerd. Shows through in your social media.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I like being a nerd. So.
Hey, you got to own it, right?
Yep, exactly.
So, in terms of the book, Tools of a Thief, can you share the premise of the story?
Yeah, so Tools of a Thief is about a sort of plucky young gnome who is trying to change her life, change her path. She's tired of being a thief for her aunt, and she's trying to sort of get out of that racket. She runs into a delightful bookseller, which almost all booksellers are delightful in my eyes. And they sort of start on this adventure together, her to finish her last job for her aunt, and the bookseller, Lisa, in order to sort of begin her own path and recover some lost books for the library that she's working at. And from there, they meet another person, Pace, and they become like this little traveling trio. And the book is about them going to various places, having these mini adventures, but then leading up to sort of Zizi's main conflict, where she's been trying to go all along. Can she continue moving forward and having her own life, or is she always going to be stuck being the thief?
Now that you've heard a little bit more about the book, it is time to take our first break of the podcast. When we come back, we'll be talking about the inspiration for the book and the series. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
Do you want to be healthier, yet you just don't know what to do? All these shows telling you this and that, but nothing seems to work. Well, listen close. Golden State Media Concepts has got something great for you. The Health and Wellness Podcast, dedicated to workout trends, healthy eating habits, diet, and everything about healthy living. Join us in our banters as we help you not just live life to the fullest, but live it to the healthiest.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast. I am speaking with author Hale Rambo about her high fantasy book, Tools of a Thief. Let's go ahead and return to that interview. Thank you for that. Yeah, and so what was your initial inspiration for this particular story?
So I really like the idea of low-level adventures leveling up. I play a lot of different role-playing games, my two main ones being D&D and Pathfinder, and just that sort of idea of what would it look like if you only had a little bit of experience and you wanted to be something better or greater or just different, and what would that progression look like book form. But then I also wanted to sort of mess about with deities. I really love Greek gods and Norse mythology and stuff like that. And I like thinking about if I had a whole bunch of deities and they messed up a whole bunch of stuff, what would that aftermath look like? And so I kind of combined these two together in this series, starting with Tools of a Thief.
Yeah, so in terms of the world that ZZ lives in, can you talk a little bit about the world building that you did before you started? How much of an idea of that place did you have in mind? How much did it develop as you wrote?
I did quite a bit of world building before starting the book. I really enjoy world building, and because I also love role playing games, I developed the world to run as a campaign setting for D&D at the same time that I was outlining and developing the story. So there is a lot of little things that I did in world building, such as like the trade system and how all of these different settlements interact, that I brought over into the book to make it feel very lived in. But then I got to use all of those extraneous bits in my campaign setting to run and sort of live the life in both areas.
Kind of killing two birds with one stone then.
Yeah, I wanted my cake and I wanted to eat it and I wanted to enjoy it with my friends. And I wanted to talk about my world all the time. So I figured that if I lived in it, then I could really get to know it really well.
Yeah. Did you, you said you did some research in like Norse mythology, those sorts of things. There are a lot of different deities that are worshipped throughout the book and in different places. Do you have, I'm just trying to figure out how to keep all that straight. Do you have a spreadsheet? Do you have a map? How do you keep your details?
I have a big world Bible that I use. I actually use a tool called World Anvil online, and it's for world builders, it's for writers, it's for gamers. I really, really love it. It's basically a giant wiki, and I'm a very organized person. I'm a project manager by day. So it's just natural for me to want to have like everything very organized and put together. So all of my deities are in there and I can search through them, all of their portfolios, the conflicts they have with each other. It's all in this sort of world Bible. I spent probably too much time making my world Bible, but it's one of my favorite parts about writing. So I did it because it was fun.
I have not heard of that application before, so that sounds awesome. I mean, it just sounds like an organized, data-focused person's dream.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. I really enjoy it, and there are so many people on it, and the community is really big. So
cool.
It's a great tool to use for world building.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit more about ZZ, the main character. What about her do you think will resonate with readers? She's not always a sympathetic character, but she definitely has her good traits too. So what do you think will resonate with readers?
Yeah, ZZ's spunky. She's clever and she's persistent. She doesn't always do everything right. At all, especially in the beginning. And I think that people can relate to that. Sometimes you make a bad decision. And how you treat that bad decision that really shows if you're growing or learning or not. And I think readers will enjoy how ZZ handles herself, and she takes her mistakes and tries to do better. She's just actively trying to be a better person. And I think that that's something we can all relate to.
Yeah, I agree.
Time for our second break of the podcast. When we come back, we'll be talking a little bit more about the rainbow of different people in this book. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
On the GSMC Book Review Podcast, where I am speaking with author D. Hale Rambo about her high fantasy novel, Tools of a Thief. Let's return to that interview.
In the book, it's fantasy, so of course there are a variety of different races. I wish it actually was, I never say this, but a movie that I could watch, because the describe skin tones and hair colors is really fascinating. It just sounds like a kind of Technicolor world. What prompted your decision to just have kind of a rainbow of people?
I really wanted something that was very diverse, but also fun and kind of unique to me. And I love fan art, and I love getting art commissioned. So I have some really great art of ZZ as a sort of gemstone colored ruby, and I just liked thinking, oh, what will this look like when I get this commissioned, sort of thing. Like, what would make somebody go, oh, wow, when they envision it in their head. So that's really where it comes off from, just kind of thinking, like, when you picture this character in your head, will you be like, oh, that's really cool? Or will you kind of ignore it because they're human, they're normal, sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Another aspect that I liked is the very strong relationship between ZZ and Lisa. You don't often see LGBTQI plus relationships depicted in fantasy. So was that just something that seemed natural to you, or did you want to deliberately include that aspect?
It was pretty natural. My real world is made up of people from all walks of life. Personally as well, I am straight, but my friends and my family, they're, I don't know, all over the place. That sounds weird, but that's what they would say too. So I wanted to make sure that if I was going to incorporate those types of relationships, that they were natural and they represented the people that I know today. So when the characters sort of told me, hey, we're into each other, because characters do that sometimes, I was like, cool. And then I reached out to my friends. I gave them copies of my stories, and I asked them to let me know, like, does this feel natural? Does this feel good? Is there anything I should watch out for? Because I wanted to be as respectful and as supportive as possible in writing these characters.
I love that, and I love that ZZ and Lisa are also different species. I guess different races, different something. I'm not sure.
Yeah, they're definitely different species. Yeah, different race. Yeah, I tend to, because of D&D and things like that, I definitely use the word race when playing, but in my books and my world building, I've definitely switched to species. So, but yeah, they're definitely different species. But that doesn't preclude them from falling in love, because in my idea, fantasy is is what you make of it. And if there's no reason to put in a prejudice, and there isn't a prejudice because of, specific world building reasons, then, what's to stop them?
Right. Yeah, exactly. In terms of characters, you said, you mentioned that the characters told you that they were into each other, which I hear a lot of authors say, that characters tell them things. How much character development do you do before you write, and how much evolves as you write?
So before drafting, I like to pinpoint sort of what a character's motivations are, where they want to go, and where they fit into the story or the world. I tend to world build first and then look for plot and conflict and characters from that. And then I just try to make sure that the main characters are in some point in their arc when I start writing and during writing. So like in Tools of a Thief, the three main characters are in different places in their growth arcs at the start of the book. But they tell me quite a bit during the writing about whether they like where I've started to pigeonhole them or not, and change. Lisa changed a lot between first draft and second draft. She was a lot more timid in the beginning, and she kind of held back on her ideals. But as I began writing her, she was just not like that at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't read the first version, but I think I like this Lisa just fine.
Good.
Do you include autobiographical elements within your writing?
Definitely. I relate to all of the characters, and Zizi and Lisa are pretty much different sides of me. I'm persistent to a fault, and I have that sort of insecurity, sometimes that makes you sort of falter when you're trying to do something you don't think you're good at, which I think Zizi has a lot of. And then Lisa is sort of my bookworm and curious nature, and they took on their own characteristics, but I'm definitely in there. And then Tools of a Thief in itself is the journey of trying to change your path and switch up what you do with your life, and that's exactly what I'm trying to do now. So my day job is a great job, and I'm good at it. I'm very humble about it, but it doesn't bring me any real joy, and I'm trying to switch to being a full-time fantasy author, which is really scary, but I've always wanted to do it.
Yeah, any life change is scary, but especially when I think writing is so much a part of the author, can be a little scarier even because you're putting so much of yourself out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And if people don't like it, you kind of think maybe, they don't like me, and it's really easy to sort of let that self-doubt stop you from, getting going.
Oh, self-doubt. How I know it well. It's time to take our last break of the podcast, but it does make me think that I have spoken to so many authors who talk about imposter syndrome and how very real it is. And it's just, it's a tough thing. It's a tough thing to put yourself out there like that and to kind of get over that imposter syndrome and to know that you can do it and that people do want to read your words. So I just leave you with that, and we'll take that break. Stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back.
Golden State Media Concepts Social Media Podcast. Time to hashtag everything. We talk about all the fun, crazy stories on social media. From Instagram to Facebook, Twitter to Tumblr, or probably even Friendster. Join us each week as we explore the quirky side of social media. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Social Media Podcast.
It's simple, such a sad song. The one that we rely on to get us.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and the conclusion of my interview with author D. Hale Rambo.
What about fantasy? I mean, obviously you do role-playing games and all of that good stuff, so I would imagine that has part of something to do with it. But what about writing fantasy, especially high fantasy? What about that genre do you think draws you to it?
I love that it's something that I can completely make up. So high fantasy to me means the world is completely fictional. And I just love that I can make up all these rules. I get to sort of pull away from the world that we live in now to a world that's very different. There can be floating islands and everyone can own a dragon or things like that. It's just very epic what you can do in fantasy. And even sci-fi. I love watching sci-fi more than I love trying to write it. But fantasy for me is just a door opener.
I'm completely on the same page about watching fantasy versus trying to write. I mean, watching sci-fi versus trying to write about it. I just can't quite. It's the science part for me. You know, it can be future tech, but it still has to be grounded in actual science.
Yeah, exactly. And I love taking that sort of stuff in, but I just trying to think of doing that and trying to do it well, no, it's not for me.
Yeah. So, Tools of the Thief is the first in a series. Do you have a vision for how many books you want in this series, or do you have just an arc and it'll, however many books it takes to accomplish that arc? What are you thinking in terms of number of books?
So I've planned for there to be 3 books in this series. The first book, of course, is Tools of the Thief, and then the next book is Components of a Caster, and that takes place directly where we leave off Zizi, Lisa, and Pace at the end of this book, the first one. And then the third book, hopefully we'll round it all out. Tools of the Thief opens up the arc, and then Components of a Caster carries that through, and then hopefully, I say hopefully because when I actually start drafting the third book, who knows what the characters will tell me they actually want to do, but hopefully I'll be able to close out sort of the world arc that I've started at the end of Tools of a Thief.
Okay. And so is that what you're working on right now? Are you working on the second book, the third book, something completely different?
Yeah, so the second book is actually completely drafted. It's going through the editing process right now. So I'm working on something completely different in the meantime. I'm working on a fantasy mystery series. So I wanted to kind of take the idea of a private investigator, kind of like the Sherlock Holmes type, but a little less manic, and mix it up with a big fantasy concept. Planar travel. So being able to travel through planes, like how would that change the job of a private eye? Who regulates that sort of travel? Things like that. So I'm currently drafting that first book and targeting early next year for publishing it.
Oh, fun. I laughed when you said Sherlock Holmes, but a little less manic.
Yeah.
It sounds like you've always kind of been drawn to writing. When did you start writing, and then when did you decide that you wanted to try to write for publication?
So I've been writing since I was in middle school, for sure. I wrote a lot of poems. I was super into poetry, and I used to write a lot of plays in high school. I actually went to college for creative writing as a playwright. But then life happened. ... My grandfather, who took care of me, became pretty sick, so I had to get a full-time job, and then life sort of moved on. So in the last few years, about the last 5 years, I started taking it back up seriously again, and decided that I wanted to publish. I definitely wanted to get my writing and my work out there, and just sort of put some of the stuff that I wanted to see into the book world.
All right. And then from that experience, do you have advice for aspiring authors?
Absolutely. Don't give up. It's hard work, especially when writing can feel really lonely. Join a group and try to stick with it. I think that it's really easy to get insecure, but you can quickly see how many other writers can relate if you voice those insecurities in a group you can trust.
Do you have an online group, an in-person group? What kind of group did you find?
All my groups are well, actually, that's not true. I have a group that is in person. I meet with two other writers, one of romance and another fantasy writer. We meet about once a month. It moved online, of course, because of the pandemic, but we still meet and talk and just sort of enjoy each other's company and lean on each other for support. I also found a really great Discord server, indie authors, that they are very encouraging and supportive on the self-publishing front. A lot of super knowledgeable people, and they're just fun. So that's nice. It's nice to sort of go to a virtual coffee shop and meet other people who are trying to do the same thing you're trying to do.
Mm-hmm. Okay. When you take the time to read for yourself, I'm going to guess that you read a lot of fantasy, but what are your go-to genres and authors?
So I really like, in sort of the speculative fiction world, Jasper Fforde. He's my go-to author for the most part. He writes these brilliant Thursday Next books about like an alternative England in the 80s. They're very funny. She's sort of a law officer who does all this stuff, and there's like time travel, and they jump in and out of books and solve mysteries. It's kind of all over the place in a very, very fun way. And then Gail Carriger is another favorite. I'm really into spies and investigators. So she has this series about this sort of strong woman who works with a variety of her friends and families to solve personal mysteries and just try to live her life with good tea. That's her whole thing, good tea, and I love that. But outside of fantasy, I love romance. I love romance a lot. I grew up on Julie Garwood and Nora Roberts. I have maybe 100 books in that category.
Yes. I grew up on the same too.
Oh, they're so good. I love them. I love Julie Garwood, kind of her fantasy stuff. It really sort of brought me into that world before other fantasy authors, which I feel like is a little sacrilege to say, but it's true.
Okay. I just like them because you know what you're getting when you go into them. You know there's going to be a happy ending. Mm-hmm. There's going to be stuff that happens, but you don't have to worry. The happy ending will come eventually.
Yes, exactly. That's what's so good about romance. No matter how hard they struggle, you do know at the end that they're going to be happy. So yeah. Even when you get upset in the middle.
Exactly. I know you have a website, so if you could tell people where to find your website, where you can be found on social media, etc.
I am the Rambo Geeks. Pretty much everywhere. I'm on Twitter way, way too much, so you can definitely find me there, but I'm also on Instagram. And if you Google the Rambo Geeks, you will find me out there geeking. So.
All right. Well, let's see. We've talked about quite a number of things, but is there anything that you were hoping to be able to highlight during our time together that we haven't touched on?
No, this was really enjoyable. I mean, we've definitely covered that I'm a big nerd, and, and I love writing. And if anyone out there is a big nerd too, definitely message me. I run D&D games, and I like running them from strangers. So hey, there's that.
I should have my brother talk to you. He just he and some friends just started playing D&D. He is of the age where he should have played it originally in the 80s, but never did, and so now they're working their way through trying to figure things out.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, absolutely. I like to put together adventures and sort of beta test them. That's how I excuse the time I spend playing so much D&D.
Have you seen the meme on Facebook that it says there are two types of D&D groups? The first picture is of the Fellowship of the Ring, and they're looking all noble and about to set off on that quest. And then the second picture is just Monty Python Knights.
Oh, I love it. Yes, that's true. That's true to a T.
So I just thought that was funny. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to talk to me. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was great to talk with you.
As always, thank you again to my guest, D. Hale Rambo, for taking the time to talk to me about Tools of a Thief. If you are a fan of high fantasy, then you should definitely check it out. And you know it's a series, so you know that there's more coming, which is always fun, especially if you really like a book. So definitely check out the book and see if you fall in love with the characters and the world and want to keep going. Thank you, as always, to you, my listeners. I hope that you will join me again next time. On Friday, I will be speaking with author Gail Massey about her collection of short stories. It's called Rising and Other Stories, So join me for that. In the meantime, if you are a fan of this podcast, as always, please follow on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And if you would be so kind as to take a moment to leave a review, written or starred, I would so greatly appreciate it, and it will help to get this podcast out to other people who love books as much as you and I do. Thank you again. I hope that your week is going well, and as always, please make room in that week for lots of time to get yourself lost in a good book. Thanks, and I'll talk to you next time.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.